Google to a buyer. Well, how do you know Google's correct? And my question to you, how do you know your source is true? Yami says, sorry, if an agency agreement expired, the buyer decided to buy the house that I showed before straight from the seller. Am I still the procuring cause of the deal? If you chase after it and you have a protection clause in your contract, then yes, you are protected. You'll talk to your broker about protection clauses. Or we can talk about it Friday when we talk about listing agreements. Jason, if someone asks you, would you buy this house? And your answer is that opinion or fact? Are you allowed to even answer that question? My answer to that question is, I already own at least one house. I don't need another one. So I'm not interested in buying another house. Designations is a specialty? Yes. Like I worked in construction for many years. Well, in specific, David, what in construction did you do? There's many different construction jobs. Did you frame? Are you a finish carpenter? Are you a roofer? Are you a structural engineer? Are you a finesse carpenter? What are you? So that's what I'm talking about. What is the name of the rebate law? There is none. What is the answer for 28? 28 was C as in Charlie. I thought you said keep the loyalty to, huh? I thought you said keep the loyalty to seller. Can you explain? See question 26. But remember, you're required to disclose all material information about all conditions surrounding this. So if you represent a buyer who cannot buy, and you represent them as a buyer who can buy, you're concealing a material defect of which you know he can't buy. So you're obligated to disclose there. I Googled, what was the name of that? I Googled it and it does not say a name for it. No, I'm not aware of any of if you're talking about the rebate law, there is no name for it. I just explained 26, so no, I'm not going to do it again. Off topic, are you doing the review tonight? No, I only work during the days. I'm semi-retired. I don't work 24,000 hours a day anymore. There are reliable sources in the internet. My question is, can you only state what is stated by the seller, broker, inspector? You got to be more specific, Insani. I don't know what you're referring to. If you have a specific instance about disclosure, please present it because you're giving a very nebulous question. Why does payment to the broker come from one side during dual agency and never both, even though you helped both parties? I didn't say you couldn't. You can be paid by both parties if you do not represent both. I'm not saying that you can or can't. I'm just saying that, well, as your question, why does payment to the broker come from one side? It could come from both. You ask your broker how you're going to be able to do that. That's not my obligation to disclose to you. What is the name of the rebate law? Again, Ayana, I don't have a name for the rebate law. There is no name for the rebate law. So please stop asking the same question over and over again. What if a seller agent sells to a, what if a seller agent sells to a buyer and it appeared that there was no buyer's broker involved? However, the buyer signed a written contract with the broker that was not disclosed. Does the broker still get? Boy, that's a big what if question. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to even answer that because that sounds actually kind of preposterous. So please keep your questions specific to the ideas. Let's not convolute it out in different or permutate it out in different things. So a general contractor is different than a construction worker. Wouldn't you agree, David? I asked before if all these rules were enacted to protect the consumer, buyer, or renter. Yes. I didn't see your question, Trinidad, so please, just ask the question. You all got to use fewer pronouns in these questions. It's really hard for our homie. I'm your homie. I'm your homie. Thank you. I appreciate that. Don't mind my question again. I thought you didn't see it. That's all right. Even when acting with written consent of dual agency, the broker is not allowed to accept compensation from both buyers and sellers in the same transaction. The dual agent may be paid by either the buyer or the seller, but never both in the same transaction if you represent both. But what if you don't represent both in the same transaction? Then you can collect commission from both. Today, the schedule said test review. Check your schedule because that's tonight, Viviana. That's tonight, not today. What's the difference between a listing agreement and a seller's agreement? The listing agreement authorizes a broker to market, advertise, and list your property in the MLS to attract buyers and share your commission with other brokers. The seller's agreement? I never even heard of a seller's agreement. So where did you get that statement from? I typed it 3 times, or I don't know what you're even referring to. All right. Okay, guys, I do have to move on. So if there are no other questions about what we've covered, and if you have questions about administrative stuff, guys, I don't answer those questions. I'm just here to tell you about what you need to know to pass the test. That's it. So I'm going to move on. All right. I think she means the contract representing the seller. That's the listing agreement. There is no other contract. It's just a listing agreement. All right, moving on. Chapter 4, fair housing. Yeah, this is going to be a interesting chapter. It's not going to take us all day, but it is a very important chapter to comprehend because we're going to discuss 2 bodies of law. We're going to discuss the federal fair housing laws, and we're going to discuss the New Jersey laws against discrimination. We're also going to discuss ideas relating to income discrimination in housing and other topics. So by the end of this chapter, you should be able to identify protections of the federal fair housing laws, including enforcement, as well as describe the protections of the New Jersey law against discrimination, including state regulations on rentals, and discuss the implications of fair housing laws for brokers and salespersons. Okay. So we have federal and state laws. You also may have some municipal laws about human rights and fair housing. But we're concerned with the federal fair housing laws and the New Jersey laws against discrimination, 2 separate bodies of law. The reason we have these laws is to create a single unbiased housing market and make sure that equal opportunity to every financially qualified buyer is out there. Failure to comply with these requirements are grounds for loss of license. It could be fines, and in some cases, it could even be criminal or civil penalties. Therefore, it's an unlawful act to discriminate. So we're going to start with the federal fair housing laws. So you guys obviously went to school somewhere, and maybe you learned about U.S. history in one of your classes, and that's the one you remember you slept in. You know, you got high at gym and you came in, you just, and you didn't learn. You know. Well, anyway, it's important to know your history. So in 1863, well, that was a long time ago. What does that have to do with today? Well, it has everything to do with today. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln created the Emancipation Proclamation, which stated, within the borders of the United States of America, all slaves are declared free men. That was the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. Well, a lot of industry in our southern brother states didn't like that Emancipation Proclamation because much of their source of labor was from slaves, and they didn't want to give it up. So we actually went to war with ourselves. The Civil War of the United States lasted 2 to 3 years, ended in 1865. The South lost, all slaves were set free, and discrimination ended forever in the United States. If you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. So in 1866, Congress enacted a law called the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which proclaimed that no man shall be deprived of opportunity because of his race. And at that time, race meant skin color. So that obviously ended all discrimination forever. No, it didn't. From 1866 all the way until 1968, discrimination flourished throughout the United States. We had the Dred Scott decision in the late 1870s when new territories were opening up out in the western United States. People could own slaves in some free territories, and some couldn't. So this problem of discrimination was not done. Now, I'm going to date myself here, and you guys, some of you guys can't relate to this image, but when I grew up in the late 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't remember much in the 60s. It was a good time. 70s, man, a lot of disco dancing. But I remember in the early 60s, we took a car ride down to Florida to visit my mom's family. Never been to Florida before, and we decided to drive down. So Dad loaded us up into the family truckster, and here we are, on the road down to Florida. Well, down in Georgia, we decided to pull off and get something to eat. As we pulled off the highway, we pulled into a cafe. And I remember to this day, my father saying, "Do you see this building?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "What's wrong with it?" I said, "It has two entrances." He goes, "Exactly." And we didn't stay there. We went to another place. The two entrances I'm talking about said this. One said colored entrance. And this one said white entrance. Segregation was the practice of the day. Separate but equal was the philosophy. In fact, states had acquired this philosophy through the generations since 1866 to justify why whites and coloreds should never be allowed to intermingle. So they said, we'll create separate but equal facilities for all. However, if you actually think about discrimination, as soon as you separate anyone by the color of their skin, that's discrimination in and of itself. So discrimination was alive and kicking for the entire century that followed 1866. And it wasn't until 1964 when Lyndon Johnson, the president of the United States, who came into power after John Kennedy was assassinated, created the Great Society philosophy and created the Civil Rights Act of 1964. However, it did not apply to housing. So in 1968, Congress created the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 that said no housing opportunity can be denied persons based on their race, which is already protected, and there's no exception to the 1866 rule. They're protected against race, against color, against religion, and against national origin. So you could not deny housing based on these four qualifications. And in 1974, because of the women's movement, sex was added as a protected class. So women now had the rights of men. If you doubt me, guys, talk to your parents or grandparents or aunts or whoever was alive back in the 60s and 70s. They could never get credit on their own. A woman walked into a bank and said, "I need a loan." They just looked at her and laughed. Said, "Until your husband comes back, we can't talk to you." They were viewed as inferior. They couldn't get credit. But in 1974, they're now protected against unfair housing practices and credit. And then in 1988, the law was amended again to include families, in other words, children under 18, pregnant women under the Familial Status Amendment, and people with mental or physical disabilities. So now it grew from just race in 1866 to now race, color, religion, national origin, sex, mental or physical disability, and familial status as protected classes. So you cannot deny housing based on any one of these criteria under federal law. Was there any question about our discussion so far? And by the way, in 1968, Newark pretty much burned to the ground under race riots. And if you think I'm kidding me, you guys don't know your history. It was a very dark time in the United States from the 50s and 60s. Is ancestry considered national origin? Well, nation of origin means where you come from. Your ancestry is your lineage. It's different. That was very interesting. Okay. Will we need exact dates during the test? You will need to know dates. Will they ask for special? Yep. Were you alive to experience it? Yes, I was. Ryan, I'm 63 years old. That means I was born in the mid-50s. Yeah. I remember seeing this stuff live on TV as it happened in crystal clear black and white on my cathode ray tube TV. So yeah, I'm an oldster. Yes, thank you, Luciana. Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. It was horrible times in the United States, man. It was in the 60s, after World War II, that our nation actually started to wake up a little bit. But then in the 50s, we had the civil rights marches, Selma. We had, the Washington peace marches and Martin Luther King. And then in the 60s, they started to assassinate all these people and bad things happened. Race riots occurred. Very, very sad time in our history. But when I was 26, God bless you. You automatically passed and moved to the head of class, Dale. You don't have to come back to any class whatsoever. So yeah, guys, this is the real stuff that happened. This is real stuff. And these laws were created to stop this kind of behavior. So yes, let's move on. I agree. You didn't think I was 26. How could you think? Was this very blonde? Yeah, this is very blonde. So anyway, the federal fair housing laws are very important to understand because it's the basis of our modern anti-discrimination policies. The 1866 Civil Rights Act, there is no exception to. You can never discriminate based on race. Ever. And as an extension, there was a law case settled in 1968 that stemmed from a 1965 issue. A colored man by the name of Jones went to buy a house, a brand new house by the Mayer Construction Company. He was denied the purchase of a house because he was a man of color. Mr. Jones sued the Mayer Company and won his case in court. And as a penalty, the courts decided that the Mayer Company needed to sell a house to Mr. Jones in 1968 at the price it would have offered him in 1965, therefore causing the construction company to lose money on the transaction. That was a deciding case in the rights of housing opportunities. Every broker in the United States, especially in New Jersey here, is required to post the equal housing opportunity poster, and on page 66 of your 14th edition hardcover Dearborn Essentials of New Jersey Real Estate textbook has that poster. So if you turn to page 66, that's the poster that every broker must have on prominent display where everyone can see it. It must be conspicuously displayed as evidence of non-discrimination. The federal government requires this of every broker in the United States to do. If the broker does not display this poster, the broker is guilty of a $100 a day penalty until he posts it. And if a case of discrimination comes up, the courts will use the fact that there was no poster as prima facie evidence against that broker of an intent to discriminate. So this poster is very important for brokers to post in their offices. Now, there are some exceptions to this, but for the poster, you need to know for your test. It's important to understand that brokers must display this. All right. Moving on. Oh, there are certain illegal practices under the federal fair housing laws that are prohibited. Number one is called blockbusting or panic peddling. Now, when I first saw this in action, it was on a sitcom TV show, and I think it was 1974-ish. The sitcom was called All in the Family. Now, they couldn't make that show today. It's a story of a husband and wife, Archie and Edith Bunker, who live in Queens, New York. Archie is a hardcore, bigoted Teamster, and Edith is not very bright. They live with their daughter, Gloria, and her boyfriend, Michael Stivic. Archie used to call Michael Stivic all kinds of derogatory names like the Polak and all kinds of things. Archie would use words like, and excuse me if I offend anybody, I'm just relaying a story, Jews, spics, swaps, heebs, all kinds of derogatory things in the sitcom. This is 74 when the censorship was being tested on TV. They couldn't make that show today because of the words involved. But here he is in his living room, sitting in his chair, and there's a knock on the door. So he gets up and he goes, yeah, who is it? Archie, it's your neighborhood realtor. He goes, what do you want? He goes, you got to sell your house now. He says, how come I got to sell my house? Don't you know who's moving in next door? And if they do, your values are going down the toilet. What are you talking about? Who's moving in next door? It was George and Wheezy Jefferson. Now, maybe you guys remember the Jeffersons on TV a long, long time ago. Well, they were a black couple. And the realtor was inferring that the Bunkers were going to lose a lot of money on their house if the black people move in. So he got to sell now before it loses value. That, my friends, was a crystal clear textbook example of blockbusting. Trying to induce a panic atmosphere so the broker could make a quick buck by inferring that a certain type of person was moving into the neighborhood that could change the entire character of the neighborhood. Blockbusting is an illegal practice. It is not permitted. If realtors are found doing this, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, there is no defense. You're going to get fined, you're going to lose your license, and there's probably going to be civil and or criminal charges filed against you. So no real estate agent, broker, salesperson, anybody can blockbust. It's not allowed. It's illegal. There's another type of illegal practice called steering. Some people refer to as racial steering. Let's say a person of a certain minority comes into my office and says, I want to buy a house. So I only show them houses in neighborhoods where there are minorities like this person. I only show them houses in neighborhoods where there are people like this person. Because in my opinion, they should live with people who are like them. Well, guess what? That's illegal. Racial steering is completely unethical. People have the right to buy houses wherever they want to buy them, not where I tell them they got to buy. Steering is illegal. Don't do it. You'll lose your license if you're caught doing it. Redlining and other illegal practices done by banks and insurance companies that would say, they'd look at a map and say, you know what, in these 2 square block areas, we're not going to lend money to anybody who wants to buy houses in that area because of the rate of crime, the drug use, the foreclosure rates. We're not going to lend money to people who want to buy there. It's a bad area. Banks can't make that decision. People have the right to move and live wherever they want, not where the banks tell them they can live. So redlining is a illegal practice as well. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about this? Wait, I thought you were 26 too. I want to pass. Ha ha, Chris, we're too late. Does blockbuster include a big box store is moving in the neighborhood, or does it pertain to people? It doesn't just pertain to people, no. It's any panic-induced peddling. Yes, Stacy, exactly. Oh boy, where are those good old days, huh? All right, anybody else with a question or comment before we move on? I do want to get through this today, guys. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions or comments, so let's move on. Now, enforcement. It's not in your PowerPoint, it's in your book, however. Now, please pay attention here, guys, and please make notes. The 14th edition is different from the 13th edition. This is one of the changes, and I'll get to it in a minute. But first of all, under enforcement, if a person feels that their rights were violated under the federal fair housing laws, well, then that person has the right to file a complaint in any HUD, Housing and Urban Development office, in any federal office building, and there's at least 5 of them in the state of New Jersey. They have 1 year from the date of the occurrence to file a complaint. If the person who did this practice is found guilty, now under the 13th edition, which still holds true for your testing, the maximum penalty that can be wagered against you is $19,787. So again, real quick, if a person is found guilty under federal fair housing laws, first of all, there's a year to make a filed charge in any HUD office, and found guilty, the first offense is punishable up to $19,787. That's for the 13th edition. The 14th edition says it's $21,039. So Tim, which one do we do? Which one do we get tested on? You're going to be tested on the 13th edition until we're notified of a change, and we haven't been notified of a change yet. So on a real estate exam, if you're asked this question, your answer is $19,787. If we're notified the commission that the test has changed, then we'll let you know that now it will be $21,039, but still, it is still $19,787, first offense maximum violation penalty. Any question on that? How many changes will there be? There's only about 2 or 3 in the entire book. This is one of them. That's why I'm making a special note to let you know. If found guilty by the federal judge overseeing the federal claim in a federal court. Okay, let's move on, guys. Can we contest it if we forget which one to put? Sorry, no. No, I'm telling you right now, until we're notified, you're still being charged under the 13th edition guidelines, which is $19,787. Until you hear differently, that's the answer you must offer. Based on the Civil Rights Act of 1866, well, that pertains to race only. Remember, there's an entire body of law called the Federal Fair Housing Laws that encompasses much more than just race. Okay, guys, do have to move on. All right. Now, the second body of law we have to understand is the New Jersey law against discrimination. The New Jersey law against discrimination is much different than the federal fair housing laws. Remember, the federal fair housing laws go all the way back to 1866, in which race is classified as protected class, and you can never have an exception to the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Well, the New Jersey laws against discrimination have a different origin. Starting shortly after World War II, when housing became a big ticket in New Jersey and New York, entire metropolitan areas suddenly found themselves in a building boom. Since the Second World War, New Jersey has been very proactive in developing its laws against discrimination. They base some of their laws on the federal laws: race, color, national origin, nationality and creed, sex and gender, but it went on from that. Today, all these classes that you see are protected under New Jersey law against discrimination, much more than the federal fair housing laws. Race, color, national origin, ancestry, nationality, creed, religion, sex, gender identity or expression, affectional or sexual orientation, marital status, civil union, domestic partner, familial status, pregnancy and breastfeeding, actual or perceived physical or mental disability, source of lawful income used for mortgage or rent payments, and liability for service in the armed forces of the United States. New Jersey, back in 2013, was one of the first states to adopt the same-sex marriage amendment to our fair housing laws. So New Jersey law against discrimination has been very proactive throughout time and encompassing many, many things that are not encompassed under the federal housing laws. So before I move further, what questions I see people trying to ask? So go ahead, what's your questions? Ayana, what do you mean found guilty of a discriminatory practice is what we're talking about? Yes, we are very progressive here in New Jersey, believe it or not. Compared to some other states, yes. All right, not seeing any other questions. Hang on, is there a year attached to New Jersey law just after World War II? Just after World War II. All right, let's move on. Please explain last entry, liability for service in the armed forces. Is that what you're talking about, Joseph? Well, if so, that means if you are employed in the military and you're called to active service, you cannot be discriminated against. If you are a member of the military, you cannot be denied housing because you're a military member. And there are special protections against rental units for military members. If you're called to active duty while renting an apartment, they can't evict your spouse or kids while you're off serving. So there are protections under the New Jersey law against discrimination. All right, let's move on. Now, there are certain prohibited activities in New Jersey. Real estate agents and brokers cannot refuse to sell, rent, lease, sign, or sublease as a means of discrimination. For licensees, refusing to offer property or negotiate transactions as a means of discrimination or lying about the availability of properties is prohibited. I happen to know this secondhand. What do you mean secondhand? Well, I wasn't found guilty and I wasn't charged, but a friend of mine who was a broker in northern New Jersey found out what this meant in a very negative way. For a couple of years, this person was accused of discriminatory behavior. Now, I knew the gentleman, and I can tell you, I never personally witnessed it. However, I suspected it. I never said anything, but apparently a customer made a complaint to the Real Estate Commission. The Real Estate Commission hired undercover shoppers known as testers. And what they did is they sent up a white couple dressed a certain way with a little lapel camera and microphone with certain financial criteria. And they walked into this broker's office and said, "This is our criteria. We'd like to see some houses." Well, the broker gave them some coffee, had some discussions. Then later that afternoon showed them a few houses with the promise that if they came back, he'd have more to show them. Everything seemed fine. The very next weekend, a black couple dressed the exact same way, with the exact same financial qualifications, and the exact same needs and desires went to this broker. And when the broker sat down with me, he says, I got nothing for you, you can leave. In other words, that broker now is caught on camera being very consultative to the white couple, but outright hostile to the black couple. Very disturbing to see. And when presented with the evidence at a hearing, the real estate commission asked him, how do you plead? And the broker said, obviously I'm on camera and you have it all. Guilty. His real estate broker's license was revoked forever. His business license to conduct real estate was revoked, his brokerage license. He was sued by the state of New Jersey under a civil complaint and had to pay large fines. Lost his business, lost his money, lost everything because he chose to discriminate. Guys, I'm not making this stuff up. This stuff actually happens. And when it happens and they're caught, I'm like, yes, good, get the bastard, excuse me. Because I don't agree with the philosophy of discriminatory behavior. It's unacceptable. For crying out loud, we're in the 21st freaking century. And we got to still put up with people who choose to actively discriminate? No. I'm going to tell you right now, if you have an issue with certain types of people and you're not going to service them when they need your help, then don't bother completing this course. Just go away. You're not going to be welcome in the real estate community. You're going to be expected to be able to serve everyone equally. And if you can't do that, then there's no room for you in this business. Now, I'm not telling you this as just a matter of course. I'm telling you to your face. If you're a bigot, then you're not welcome. And if you don't like that, too bad. But we cannot put up with this, especially when it comes to basic needs of housing. There's absolutely no grounds for this anymore in the United States. And I'm not trying to preach moral integrity here or anything, guys. I'm just telling you as a matter of fact. If you do it, you're going to get caught and you're going to pay the price. And if you can't accept that, then I hope you never have to find out, but you will. I promise you. Because people will say things about you and you'll get caught. So please, guys, don't take this as a warning. Take it as a heart-to-heart. Everyone has the right for housing. No one has the right to discriminate in housing, period. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to discuss it anymore. Other prohibited activities, changing the terms of real estate transactions or offering special facilities or services to any people or groups of people as a means of discrimination. Or being involved in any expression, direct or indirect, of any limitation based on discrimination. Guys, discrimination is not welcome here in the practice of real estate. But there are some exceptions to the laws. Now, let's talk about this for a minute because it's important to understand why there's an exception. Rooms, apartments, or flats in certain types of housing units, like boarding houses or dormitories, can be discriminatory in who they house. It could be all men, it could be all women. That's not a law that has to be adhered to. It's an amendment or exception to the law. Let's say you live near Montclair State College and you have a 7-bedroom home and all the kids are gone, grown up, moved away. You may want to rent out your 7 bedrooms to 7 women students. And if so, you have the right to do that because it's a private residence. If you don't use a realtor and you don't use discriminatory words in an advertisement, you can choose to rent to all women and not violate the laws in New Jersey. It's perfectly acceptable because your house now is a rooming house. Just going through puberty. Another group that is protected is religious-based residencies. I'm not Jewish. And if I apply to a Jewish retirement home, their chances are I'm not going to get accepted. Why? Because I'm not Jewish. That's discrimination. No, it's not. A religious-based organization that runs housing for its members is just that. It's religious-based. And there's an exception in the law here for that. Another exception is an owner-occupant of a 1 or 2 family dwelling. If you're an owner-occupant, meaning you live in the 1 or 2 family property, then you have the right to discriminate based on any criteria whatsoever from anybody else who wants to live in that building, except for race. If you don't like straight people, you can say no straight people, but you can't put in an ad. That's discriminatory. You can just let them know that we don't rent to straight people. Or if it's gay people, let's be fair. So an owner-occupant, if they don't use a realtor, they don't use discriminatory words in an ad, can discriminate based on any criteria except for race. Those are the exceptions in New Jersey, plus there's one more. The federal exception is 62 years of age or older communities. If you live in one of those communities, you're not allowed to have your children live with you. And there are certain communities that if you have a certain percentage of residents who are 55 and older, the law applies to them as well. So in New Jersey, you have communities, pretty much down South Jersey, Lakewood, Manchester, Toms River, thousands and thousands of homes and retirement communities where only seniors live. No children are allowed to live there. And if they come to visit, they can only visit for a certain period of time. And then they got to move, then they got to get out. That's exceptions under the New Jersey and the federal fair housing laws. Any questions about our discussion so far? Oh, crumb. Sorry. Just did that. Let me open it up. Any discussion or any questions? Let's see. Can you sue an owner for not wanting to rent to you because you aren't gay? Isn't that a type of discrimination? You said they can put it in, they can't put it in an ad. So they tell you upon showing. Well, if they're an owner occupant of the 1 or 2 family house, then yes, they can do that under the exemption in New Jersey. Are real estate agents or landlords allowed to discriminate against students? Specifically, Adrian, in what manner? Because they're a student or because of financial issues? I'm going to have to ask you to justify that. If you have a license as a realtor and the owner but only rent to women, is that considered discriminatory? Again, if you're an owner occupant of the 1 or 2 family, since you are a realtor, there's no exemptions for you. Sorry. South Jersey is south of Trenton. Well, okay, I'll buy that. Central Jersey, how's that? What about a landlord who does not live in the home and refuses to rent to a family or more of a specific amount of children? No families paid, only couples with no children. No, that's discriminatory, Mohammed. You can't discriminate because of familial status. That's against the law. College students, because they're students, not financial issues. Say parents were co-signing and covering rent. All right, let me go back to your original question to find out what it was about. Are real estate agents or landlords allowed to discriminate against students, college students? No. If they're financially qualified, then no, you can't discriminate against them. As a realtor, no. No such thing as Central Jersey. I think I agree with that. Heard it more than once when our family was looking to rent while younger, since we were about 5 kids. Now I know it's illegal. Yes, it is. If you bar people who were in tenant-landlord court before. Say that again, David. What do you mean? I don't see a question there, and I don't understand the statement. Please, if you're going to ask a question, please, I'm going to beg of you for like the 20th time, David. Please ask a complete question that I can answer. Don't just put like a statement out there expecting me to understand what you mean. That's tough. Regarding the room apartments and certain types of housing, what types of housing would be and how do you know you are allowed to be exempt? I'm sorry, regarding the rooms, apartments, and certain types of housing. So rooming houses, boarding houses used for the purpose of renting out rooms. If people are people who notorious don't pay their rent, well, if they don't pay rent, I would never rent to them. What happens if the seller wants to list and doesn't want to rent to a gay person? Then you get rid of that client. You walk away and rip up the listing agreement. And we're taken to court and got a fix. I'm sorry. Again, I don't understand your statements. Sorry, I'm gonna have to close the conversation, guys. I do need to move on. But please, I'm gonna beg with you one last time. If you have a question, form a complete question and ask it. Don't give me snippets of words or comments and expect me to understand what you mean. It's impossible for me to do that. So please be gentle with me, please. Okay. Now, New Jersey requirements. The law against discrimination applies to also to loans for real estate transactions, whether institutional or private individuals. So remember, redlining prohibited, blockbusting prohibited, anti-discrimination poster. Yes, even New Jersey has a New Jersey law that prohibits discrimination in housing poster on page 71 in your 14th edition hardcover Dearborn Essentials of Real Estate textbook, which must be posted right next to the federal fair housing poster, and the same laws apply. If it's not, $100 a day penalty and proof of an intent to discriminate. Also, well, we'll talk about this when we get back at 3 o'clock because it is 2:30. So for the next 30 minutes, guys, talk amongst yourselves, and I will be back at 3 o'clock to wrap up the day with you. So I will see you at 3. Guys, there's nothing wrong with my internet connection. We're on break until 3. So I'll see you at 3. All righty, 3 o'clock. Let's get started and finish up this day. I'd like to be out of here and home with my hot toddy before too long. So let's finish up this slide as it is. I'm going to put everybody on moderate for a minute. Notice that listing is the last topic on the PowerPoint in front of you. Now, what is that notice at listing? Well, if you turn to page 72 and 73 in your 14th edition hardcover Dearborn Essentials of New Jersey Real Estate textbook, you'll see that it's called the Attorney General's Memorandum. What? Yes. Whenever as a active agent, I'm out taking a listing, whether it's for sale or rent of a residential property, I must, while taking the listing, present the Attorney General's memorandum to the seller or landlord, which states, and in effect, I'm just going to summarize this whole thing. Dear Mr. Seller, Mr. Landlord, as a matter of course, your realtor is bound by his ethical obligations of never discriminating his business practices, and he is forbidden to do so. However, if you have any intent to discriminate whatsoever, you must make that notice to the real estate professional so he prevents himself from getting involved in a transaction that could cost him dearly. In other words, Mr. Seller, your realtor can't discriminate. If you have any intention to discriminate, you got to tell your realtor so he rejects the listing and walks away. This is very important to remember. You're going to be required to do this at every listing that you try to get, whether it's for sale or rent of a residential property. It happened to me in one occasion where I was interviewing a seller in Wayne, and he told me, yes, I want to sell my property. When can I list it? I said, we could do it right now. He said, great. And as we're filling out the listing agreement, I said, and just by the way, here's a copy of the Attorney General's memorandum required to give to you stating that I can't discriminate. And if you have any intention to discriminate, you got to tell me now so I don't get involved in the sale of your house, okay? He goes, no problem, starts signing the statement. He goes, just don't show my house to any of them. And I won't say what them was. I said, you're being funny, right? He goes, no, I'm being serious. I go, wait a minute, what? He goes, just don't show my house. I'm not going to sell to any of them. I said, that's discrimination. He goes, no, it's not. You just don't sell it to any of them. You can call it whatever you want, but it's not, in my opinion, discrimination. I said, well, sir, in fact, you're asking me not to show your property or sell it to anybody of a certain classification. Is that correct? Yes, that's discrimination. Well, I don't care what you call it. It's just that that's the way I'm selling my house. If you don't like that, then too bad. I said, well, unfortunately, it is. And I have to reject your listing. He goes, how come? I said, because you're going to discriminate against who I bring to the property to buy it. He goes, no, I'm not. Just don't let it be any of them. That's all. Duh. So I stood up, I grabbed the listing agreement, and I ripped it in half, dropped it on his table, and I said, you, sir, are a bigot, and I left. I believe in calling a spade, and this guy was a bigot, and I called him to his face. You, sir, are a bigot, and I left. A day later, I get a call from my buddy John, you know, the guy I was telling you about before. John's a competing broker, and he's a very good one. And he calls me up, and he says, hey, Jensen, just want to let you know I got that listing over there at that guy's house. I said, oh, you mean Frank? He goes, yeah. He goes, but I noticed that there was a ripped up listing agreement and your company heading was on that agreement. And I got to ask, why didn't you take that listing? Because you don't do that. You always get listings. I said, well, John, you know me. And you know I would never reject a listing unless it was for very important reasons. He goes, what am I missing, Jensen? Why am I getting listed and you didn't get the listing? I got to know. I said, John, all I can tell you is Attorney General's memorandum. And I hear this on the other end of the phone. Ah, crap. And he hangs up the phone. An hour later, John calls me back. Jensen, I got to tell you, you stinker. You got me again. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, I had to call that guy back and tell him about the Attorney General's memorandum because I forgot to do it at the listing. And he tells me I can't show the house to any of them. landlord. So naturally, I had to rip up the listing and remove it from the MLS. I had to tell everybody who was calling that the house is no longer available. In other words, John forgot to tell the seller about the Attorney General's memorandum. And it was a simple oversight, and it does happen. But guys, I'm going to tell you right now, you're required to discuss this with every seller and every landlord of a residential property. So be it. A month went by, and we saw the house come up with another broker, and then 3 days later, disappear. Gone from the MLS. A month later, comes up with another broker, and 2 days later, it disappears. And this happened time again over the next 7 or 8 months. Brokers would list it and then have to withdraw it because discriminatory practices by the landlord or the owner. And then a year almost to the date that I rejected this guy listing, he calls me back up and he says, "You were in my house a year ago." I said, "Yes, I was." He goes, "You were the only realtor to tell me about the laws against discrimination. All these other guys just took the listing and then told me later it was no good." He goes, "I need to sell my house." I said, "I told you I can't do business with you." He goes, "Well, what if I promise not to discriminate?" This would be over in 5 minutes. I was there in 2. Had him sign a listing agreement, and then I had him sign a copy of the Attorney General's memorandum that I kept. So if he ever said I never discussed it, I could show any authority that, look, he signed the statement. So he knows what it's about. And you'll never guess in a million years who I sold the house to. Yes, one of them. Guys, I didn't do it intentionally, but I could never turn somebody away and say, the seller won't sell to you because you're one of them. That's ridiculous. That's discriminatory. And there's no place for that in this world today. So guys, remember, when taking listings, always use the Attorney General's notice at listing to prevent yourself from getting into a discriminatory action. Now, under the New Jersey laws against discrimination, enforcement is done under any public safety office in any law enforcement building. You have 6 months to file a claim under the New Jersey laws against discrimination. 6 months from the date of occurrence. And if found guilty, the first offender could face up to $10,000 in penalties. That did not change. So under the New Jersey laws, 6 months to file a claim and $10,000 maximum penalty for a first offender. All right. Now, there are other regulations based on state rentals of residential properties, and that is landlords cannot refuse to rent a one-bedroom apartment to 2 members of the same sex, even if the same apartment would be available to members of opposite sex who are equally qualified. In other words, you cannot discriminate based on sexual preference. Sexual harassment is forbidden. You cannot harass tenants because of their sexual preferences. No discrimination on source of income. What does that mean? That was a protected class in New Jersey, right? Well, yeah, it was. And it said, sources of lawful income used for mortgage or rental payments. That is talking about public assistance in housing, Section 8. You cannot discriminate against someone because they use public funding for a source of rental payments. That's what that's talking about. Leases cannot be voided upon the birth of a child. That's covered under the familial status protection. Facilities may prohibit pets, but not guide or service animals. Now, there's very specific guidelines here about pets and service animals. And if you give me just a second, I'm going to bring up a document that I'm going to I'm sorry, no, it's not it. That was my wish list for my booze. Here it is. Emotional support animals in housing. Now, just listen to what I'm about to read to you. An emotional support animal is an animal that a doctor or mental health professional has determined helps a person with a disability. That's different from a guide or service animal. If you want to move into a building where it has a no pet policy, the landlord or their agent cannot ask you to produce a prescription for it. That's a violation of the HIPAA laws, Health Insurance Privacy Act. Therefore, there are a few questions you could ask them. That do they have a disability? And how does this animal cure or help you in the disability? You are not allowed to demand to see the prescription to recommend this, but you have to use your best judgment. If you have a no pet policy and they're using a guide or service animal, you must allow them to house that animal in their apartment. There are other rules about this coming down, and I haven't gotten them in print yet, but we're waiting to see how this develops in the near future, because there's a lot of people claiming emotional support animals as guide or service animals, which they are not. In fact, airlines now are prohibiting people from bringing on their pets on planes unless they are bona fide service or guide animals. So the tide is changing, where landlords can now say, no, only a guide or service animal can be allowed to live here, not an emotional support animal. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sorry. People have to develop their own backbone and take their exposure to risk straight on. I need my emotional support boa constrictor on the airplane with me in case I get upset by the turbulence. Oh, please, come on. And I'm being very nasty about it. I know that. You can tell I have a pet peeve about emotional support animals, and I don't believe in the righteousness of some of these people that claim they're in need. But anyway, so there's very certain guidelines about that. A person with AIDS is considered a person with disability. An alcoholic is a person with a treatable disease and cannot be discriminated against. So there are obvious state rules and regulations that give exemptions to certain people and prohibitions against others for certain reasons. All right, so I'm about to finish up this chapter. Does anybody have any wrap-up questions before I talk about zoning discriminations? I just want to confirm again, when an owner becomes a realtor, he loses the exception to rent a boarding home to a woman only, correct? Correct, because you are a realtor. Well, Ayana, stories help you remember concepts in a very proactive way. And that's why I do use stories. Alcoholism is a disease because it's an addictive thing. What is the state penalty again for the state of New Jersey law against discrimination? Maximum of $10,000 for your first offense. When would a buyer need to disclose that they have AIDS? Well, first of all, it should never be a question. Some people just present the information to other people. I don't know why, but I would never want to ask people, do you have AIDS? I would never ask that question. Anyway, let's move on. All right, I'm going to moderate. All right. Zoning discrimination. This is housing discrimination based on income. So Mount Laurel, where's Mount Laurel? It's in New Jersey. Yeah, it is. And it's down by, I don't know, exit 4. Where are you from? Jersey. What exit? 4. Mount Laurel. Oh, yeah, I know where that is. Okay. So back in time, after World War II, workers were working for manufacturing, warehousing, and all kinds of businesses and all over the state. But in Mount Laurel, there was many warehousing and manufacturing jobs that were filled by low and moderate income earners who wanted a place to live near their offices or work environments. So in Mount Laurel, there was no place to live for low and moderate income housing needs. So the workers sued the town of Mount Laurel to provide low and moderate income housing so they could live where they work. The state Superior Court agreed with the tenants and said, yes, Mount Laurel must provide these housing units. So at the time, this is 1973, the Mount Laurel 1 decision was made in which stated Mount Laurel must provide at the rate of 20% of all new construction housing opportunities for low and moderate income earners. Meaning, if I was to build a 100-unit apartment complex, 20 of those units must be set aside for low and moderate income earners so they can afford to live there. And they're priced accordingly. And those applicants must meet certain income criteria that they don't exceed to qualify for low and moderate income earning. A great idea. And it progressed slowly. But in 1983, the Mount Laurel 2 decision was made and said that not just Mount Laurel, every municipality in the state of New Jersey must comply. So since 1983, every town in New Jersey must set aside 20% of all new construction for housing low and moderate income earners. But there were certain towns and municipalities that said, not in my backyard. So what they did is they sold or paid off other towns to take their housing obligations from them. Now, towns like Franklin Lakes, Saddle River, Alpine, Upper Saddle River, Chatham, Mendham, well-to-do communities would pay other communities like Patterson, Newark, Camden to house those people. They didn't want them in their towns. So long as those units were produced, no problem. However, Superior Court of New Jersey said, Around 1994 or so, they said, every town must provide. Therefore, now every town, when new construction is being implemented, must allocate 20% of all this new construction reserved for low and moderate income earners. That's the current framework. Today, it's administered under the Council on Affordable Housing. You don't need to know that for your test, but if you want to be up on the recent stuff, it's the Council on Affordable Housing that now determines how many units in which towns have to be provided. So a town right next door to me, Franklin Lakes, they sold the High Mountain Golf Course. That was a fun golf course to play at, by the way. It was a public course. They sold it to a developer who's putting in 2,700 units, condos, single-family homes, multiple unit structures, etc. 20% of all those units must be set aside for low and moderate income earners. And there are actual individual protesters in Franklin Lakes that have been very vocal about, we don't want those people in our town. Holy crap. People are still that ridiculous. Yes, they are. But too bad. The law states that they're allowed and they're required to provide that. So, under Mount Laurel 1 and 2, the current figure is 20% of all new construction must be set aside for low and moderate income earners so they can afford to live in certain areas in every municipality. We'll leave it at that. There is more to it, but you don't need to know any more for your test. Excuse me. Now, in real estate in New Jersey, you're going to have to pledge allegiance to a code of ethics. You're also going to have to pledge to the code of equal opportunity, which means you will not, and you pledge that you will not, discriminate in any housing activity that you do. I'm being very serious here, guys. If you can't abide by these simple directions, then you have no business in the real estate community. So, not only am I be professional in my ethics, I'm going to promise not to discriminate in my practices as well. There's something called the HUD-NAR Fair Housing Partnership. HUD meaning Housing and Urban Development, the federal or the national cabinet level division. I think it's head by Ben Carson right now. Brilliant man. And NAR, the National Association of Realtors, which team up together occasionally to sponsor educational seminars about fair housing partnerships that be created in communities. They also sponsor certain types of activities like Habitat for Humanity builds that are completely voluntary to real estate professionals. No one's going to make you do a HUD-NAR thing. However, if you're community minded, you want to give back to a community, you can participate voluntarily in the HUD-NAR partnership programs. I've actually, over my several years of real estate, participated in 2 Habitat for Humanity builds, both in Patterson, both really very good experiences for me. I come from a building background. I know construction. And when I'm working with a team of a lot of novices, I'm also working with professionals, volunteers, and the actual homeowner who's buying this property that we're creating with donated labor and materials. And there's nothing like working with an owner who's putting in their own sweat equity to build their own house. They are very appreciative of the help that you give them. And you know what? It's a very rewarding experience to help other people. If you see a question on an exam about the HUD-NAR partnership, just understand that it all has to do with voluntarism. Realtors volunteer a lot of time and money to many causes. You may be called on to do such a thing in the future, but it's not required. Okay, wrapping up the session. Implications for brokers and salesperson. First of all, display your federal fair housing law poster and the New Jersey poster against discrimination in the brokerage office. Prominently display signs stating discrimination is against your company policy and state and federal laws, and those posters attest to that. If clients have questions about discriminatory desires or practices, you must be very forthright and tell them, we don't discriminate. And whenever advertising, you should be describing property, not the buyers or tenants that are going to be occupying. And I talked to you earlier about when the Real Estate Commission hires undercover shoppers known as testers that go out into communities and ask questions of real estate practitioners. You may, in your near future, be doing an open house, and someone may walk in and start asking you some really strange questions. I wouldn't guarantee it, but the chances are that person may be a tester to see how you respond to some kind of weird question. Are you being discriminatory? Are you being honest and truthful? These are kind of things that testing will reveal. So everybody should be treated equally and fairly to avoid getting entrapped by the Real Estate Commission. It's that simple. All right, guys, the chapter's over. It's an intense chapter. I know it is, but it's a very important one too. We talk about housing. There's no room for discrimination whatsoever in our practice. So let me pull up the review questions. We'll do these and we should be able to get out of here. So chapter 4 is where we're at. So let's go ahead and do these Q&A, the last questions for chapter 4 today. Number 1, at the time an owner listed his house with a salesperson, he informs her of his general dislike of members of a particular ethnic group. The salesperson later shows the home to 2 prospective buyers, one of whom is a member of this group, and both make an offer. When the owner contacts the agent again, she does not present him with the lower offer, which was made by the member of the minority group. The salesperson has violated what? Salesperson violated what? And it looks like about 80% of you got it correct is C, the New Jersey anti-discrimination laws and the federal fair housing laws and the New Jersey real estate license laws. Obviously, laws against discrimination, federal and New Jersey, are because of the minority status, and the real estate licensing law because all written offers must be presented, and they failed to do that. That's why C is correct. Number 2, which of the following acts is permitted under the Federal Fair Housing Act? Which can you do? Which of the following acts is permitted under the Federal Fair Housing Act? And 80% of you, again, are correct in answering C, refusing to sell a home to an individual because he or she has a poor credit history. Yeah, they can't qualify, they don't get. C is perfectly acceptable. Number 3, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 is unique because the act and D for dog is correct, covers only the areas of race and color. Yes, D is correct. 70% of you had that correct. Number 4, I hear they're moving in. There goes the neighborhood. Better List with Me today is an example of %70 are correct, answering B for boy, blockbusting. Yes. Number 5, the act of channeling home seekers to a particular area, either to maintain or to change the character of the neighborhood, is called 85% of you are correct, answering C, steering. Yes, indeed. That is called steering. Number 6, which would not be permitted under the Federal Fair Housing Act? Which would not be permitted under the Federal Fair Housing Act? This is a little bit of a tricky question. And unless you read the chapter, you would not understand this. So I'm going to go ahead and just spill the beans here, and that is B for boy, in which 40% of you did get correct, is B for boy is correct. The owner of a 20-unit apartment building rents to only women. You said you could do it in rooming. I said you could do it in rooming houses or boarding houses, not in apartment buildings. No. There's different use. All right, number 7. Under federal law, families with children may be refused rental or purchase in buildings where occupants are reserved exclusively for those aged at least. I'm going to venture to guess a lot of people are going to get this one wrong. And in reality, guys, the answer is, of which 1 in 3 got correct, C, 62 years of age or older. Remember, I said there's also an exemption for a community of 55 and older over a certain percentage of home owners, however. So C is the best answer in this case. I know it's not fair. I know it sounds a little suspect, but that's Dearborn's question method here, just being honest with you. So C was correct. Number 8, guiding prospective buyers to a particular area because the agent feels they belong there may lead to. And 63% of you are correct answering C, steering. Yes, that's steering. It's illegal. Number 9, refusal to rent to someone because they receive public assistance violates. Just went over this, didn't I? And it looks like 1 in 5 got it correct. Only 20% got it correct, and it's A, New Jersey statutes. It's not covered under the federal fair housing law. It's only covered under New Jersey law against discrimination. Number 10, a policy of never renting to persons with prison records violates. A policy of never renting to persons with prison records violates no law. 45% of you got it correct. And I'm going to say this, guys, and please listen. Currently, what? Yes, property managers and landlords can ask if you have ever been convicted of a crime. And if you answer yes, they can deny you housing. Perfectly legal. However, there is a move afoot in New Jersey to change that law and eliminate the question regarding criminal history. And there's a move afoot that will make it illegal for real estate agents and landlords to discriminate based on criminal history. It's already illegal in New York, by the way. In Brooklyn recently, I had a friend call up and said, you know that they don't ask about criminal records anymore? I said, what? Yeah, they made it illegal in New York to ask about criminal records. In New Jersey, it's still legal to discriminate based on criminal history. But that may be coming to an end, just so you know. Number 11, refusing an apartment to a couple because they are unmarried violates. Refusing an apartment to a couple because they are unmarried violates C, the law against discrimination, and 67% of you had that answered correctly. Number 12, a mortgage company makes it a practice not to lend money to potential homeowners attempting to purchase property located in predominantly black neighborhoods. This practice is known as It is known as redlining, and 88% of you had that correct. Very well done. Redlining. Number 13, a court found a landlord guilty of illegal discrimination and ordered him to rent his next available apartment to the person who was unfairly hurt. The court order is an example of what? And about 53% of you are correct, answering C, an injunction. That's what it's called, an injunction. 14, the seller who requests prohibited discrimination in the showing of a home should be told So here's a lesson, guys. There's only one correct answer for any question. And 86% of you answered D correctly, all of these. Technically, A is correct, so is B, and so is C, but D is the best answer. So learn how to spot the best answer in your Q&As. Number 15, a good precaution against even unintentional discrimination is to do what? And about 2 out of 3 of you, 67%, got it correct. D, all of the above, all of these. There's only one correct answer, and every one is correct. Therefore, D is the best choice. Same result as last question. Number 16. The Federal Fair Housing Amendments of 1988 added which of the following as new protected classes? And about 87% of you got it correct. B, disability and familial status. Correct. Number 17, using the 13th edition, a fine for the first violation of the Federal Fair Housing Act could be as much as Yeah, you got it. $80% of you got it right off the bat. C, $19,787 using the 13th edition inference. That's the question. If you're asked on the state exam, you would answer C. Until we're notified of a change, and we will notify every one of you, that's the number you're going to use, C. Number 18, the only defense against an accusation of illegal discrimination is proof that it and about 73% of you got it correct. D, didn't occur. You need proof that it did not happen. Yes. Number 19, undercover investigation to see whether fair housing practices are being followed, as sometimes made by who? Boy, it was the last topic we talked about, wasn't it? And there was only one word I used to describe who these people were. 85% of you got it correct. A, testers. There's no evaluators, there's no operatives, and there's no conciliators. They're all testers. Number 20, participation in the HUD-NAR Fair Housing Partnership is hmm, hmm. And about 60% of you answered correctly. C, voluntary. Remember, I said HUD-NAR partnership has to do with voluntarism. C. Number 21, complaints brought under the New Jersey law against discrimination. Complaints brought under the New Jersey law against discrimination. B for boy, 68% of you answered correctly, must be filed within 180 days after the alleged discrimination action occurs, 6 months. Number 22, the New Jersey law against discrimination. And by the way, I posted your homework link in the chat section as well as my email address. So you can gladly just copy those right away and get your homework assignment for tonight. It's going to be chapters, obviously 3 and 4. New Jersey law against discrimination. New Jersey law against discrimination. 55% of you answered correctly. C, permits an owner-occupant of one or two family residence to deny housing to a tenant based on the applicant's age. Yes. And by the way, age is not a protected class at all. Number 23, the Mount Laurel court decision, not CART decision. The Mount Laurel court decisions attempt to correct housing discrimination based on Mount Laurel court decisions attempts to correct housing discrimination based on 80% of you are correct answering B, income. Yes, indeed, income. Couple last questions here. No, 24, at the time a property is listed, the homeowner must be given a copy of the 66% of you answered correctly C, Attorney General's Memorandum on Discrimination. That's the notice at listing, C. And finally, last question for the day. If a New Jersey salesperson sent bright yellow postcards to all homeowners in the neighborhood warning them that several immigrant families are planning to move into the neighborhood and suggesting that property values were about to fall, the salesperson would be guilty of which of the following? And 90% of you correctly answered D, block busting. Excellent, excellent work today, guys. Good retention, good comprehension. My email address in the Career Center homework slot is there for you to copy if you need it. Tonight, chapters 3 and 4 for review. You do not hand these in. You keep them for your own review when we discuss them in the morning. Tomorrow, chapters 5, 6, and 7. 3 chapters for review tomorrow. Read heartily, my friends. It's a lot to digest. So you're done for the day. You met your obligations. Congratulations. Chapters 3 and 4 in the books. You can go home. Oh, yeah, you're already home. Or do whatever you need to do. Thanks for your participation. Look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow. If you have any additional questions, please stick around. You can ask me now if you want, or you can just book out of here. And in a few minutes, if there are no questions, I'm going to book out of here too. So if you got questions, ask. Have a great night, guys. Let's see if there's any questions I missed. Yes. Oh boy. See, they're coming fast and furious here. Yesterday, when we were doing the chapter review questions, I didn't realize we had to fill in the answer on the screen, but I did not have the questions done before class. Is that going to, guys, these are the review questions from your book. They're right from the chapter review from your book. So you can just go right in your book and do everything there. And all the answers are in the back of the book, by the way. For the homework questions, the answers are at the same site the homework is posted at. All the answers for homework are posted there as well.